Number 47 is Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze has not done the job at Auburn at 6-7 and 5-7 in his 2 seasons at Auburn, and you should be able to win at Auburn. What is kind of perplexing to me is that Freeze is considered one of the offensive masterminds in football and a quarterback developer. And what was very odd is that he suffers through the 7-loss season with Auburn, in which their pass game was remarkably atrocious, beyond belief. Peyton Thorne was awful. He's stuck with Peyton Thorne. You probably don't know this because you just figure Auburn lost 7 games again, so they were just as bad on offense, and they hung on to Peyton Thorne. I don't agree with that move, but Peyton Thorne played a lot better. The Auburn offense actually was good last year. Their pass offense was top 15 to 20 in the country. They just turned the ball over every other play. So Hugh Freeze needs to fix it at Auburn. He's got all sorts of resources to his disposal. This is a program where you can compete for a national championship. This is probably the most inconsistent program in college football that can compete for a national championship. Like, this is probably the low end of the national championship contenders, where you can both say you can be mediocre at Auburn, but you can also compete for national championships. You can probably not say this to this degree. Maybe Miami would be in the same class, but of course Auburn has been much better and reached higher peaks than Miami since the Canes were last relevant nationally. So Hugh Freeze, of course, 34-15 at Liberty, did a fine job at Ole Miss, but we know how that ended, off the field issues, but also on the field issues in recruiting. And he was 39-25 at Ole Miss, but you got to kind of question his success because it stemmed in recruiting and recruiting violations. When there was a recruiting class at Ole Miss in which they picked up 3 number 1 position players, Laramie Tunzel, Laquan Treadwell come to mind. And of course, we know that there was some unsavory dealings by Mr. Hugh Freeze at that point. Okay, so at number 47, yes, the aforementioned Hugh Freeze.
Let's talk a little bit about Hugh Freeze and Auburn. They had an okay season in 2023 when he gets there. Had somewhat of a down year, tough schedule, couldn't get the quarterback figured out last year. Peyton Thorne's gone. Now they got, I think Hank Brown went to Iowa. I know they bring in Deuce Knight as this 5-star. I feel like the only thing missing for Auburn is that quarterback, uh, at in command of the offense, because they got the Perry Thompson, they got Cam Coleman. They've had some solid guys on defense and everything. This is a year for Auburn. Let me put this out there for you. They host, not go to, but they host their rivals, Georgia and Alabama, this year. I don't know about beating Georgia, but they could probably make it competitive. I would also say the same thing about the Iron Bowl, but you also got to think even Nick Saban, who's the greatest coach of all time, would go there and find ways to lose. Is this a year where we could see an upset in that game and ultimately a bounce back year for the Tigers? Could they propel to 6 or 7 wins, make a bowl, and obviously try to win that? What do you say about Auburn? Like, what's your assessment of Hugh Freeze and
I am
ultimately
pretty
what
high on
they could do this
Auburn.
year?
I am pretty high on Auburn, Ballard. I will say yeses on all of those questions. So for me, so their starting quarterback's probably going to be Jackson Arnold. You mentioned Deuce
Right.
Knight. Obviously, he's the hot shot. That's the future. But Jackson Arnold will probably be the starting quarterback. I don't think that's a certainty. He's got to win the job. What's become very obvious to me the last few years since the transfer portal took hold, Ballard, is that these coaches' fate, their destiny is very much tied to how good of a decision they make at quarterback. More so than even in the past, because in the past, if you and I were sitting here 10 years ago, 5 years ago, looking at every team in the country, we could pretty much determine, okay, this guy's the starting quarterback, or these two guys are battling for the spot. And then this guy's the backup. He's a sophomore. And then they got this really guy that they really love that they just recruited. And you knew that was going to be the quarterback room for the next 2 or 3 years. Now we have no idea. If we go through all these teams, I'm guessing 70 to 75% of them have transfer quarterbacks playing for them. So we don't know what's going to happen. And you did a nice job of outlining that Hugh Freeze, part of his demise the last 2 years in losing 7 games twice, has been that he's stuck with Peyton Thorne. He made a bad quarterback decision. When Mike Norvell took over at Florida State, he had a good quarterback that he developed in Jordan Travis, who wasn't a great quarterback, but to Mike Norvell's credit, he developed him, did really great. But then he made a bad quarterback decision in getting DJ Uiagalelei. And we could go team after team after team. And the decision to go into the transfer portal and find a quarterback versus sticking with what you've got and how that played out is obviously, Oklahoma let Dylan Gabriel run off to Oregon, and they put their money on Jackson Arnold because he was their 5-star hotshot. Didn't work out too well. And on and on and on. But I think that Auburn's put a lot of money in the transfer portal. They have really built up the NIL reserves. They've recruited great. I think that they have a team that's ready to roll. I agree with you.
I think, I think so. And I'm not going to call like a 10-win season or the playoffs, but I mean, if they could hit a ceiling of 7-5, 8-4, I think, the recruiting and everything is what's keeping Hugh Freeze alive. He's just got to find a way to really put it out there this year. Now that we assume to have a quarterback to lead the offense, you got Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson out there that you can throw the ball to. Why not go light up the scoreboard? But I'll let you get to some other calls. I love all you guys. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Ballard. Good to see you.